I've got a question for you. One team that people only talked about at the beginning of the roster move was obviously OG, because the whole narrative was like Nexa going there, and then obviously they had that little spike at the Blast tournament where they like overperformed a little bit, right? The problem I have with this squad is all the players are all right. Like, there's no one I look at the team, like, get him out the team, he's not good enough. Like, they're all players who can play at tier 1. But I'm not convinced personally by, like, this specific lineup. Like, what do you actually think of this squad? Like, I'll give you an example. One thing that immediately, if you even just look at the lineup, I feel is a concern, is, like, as much as people don't want it to be, like, they don't want CS to sound simplistic, like, it's not like people really sit around like, well, I'm the star player, and it's like, you kind of know who the star player is by how they play, by the way. That just sorts itself out. That's the problem I think I see in this team, dude, is like, if I compare them to any other team who's going to be a top 10 team, it's like their best player ain't going to match up. Like, they don't have anyone on top. They don't have any Nico fucking divide. They don't have anyone on this level as far as I can tell. Like, maybe One Day Flames could be it. He's kind of in that Spinks category, not just because they're Israeli. They're both actually similar sorts of players. They're really young in their careers. They both have mad aim, and they seem like they're sort of, these are the teams they're going to learn their skills in. But like, aside from that, listen, it's like I say, it's like maybe the floor level of the team's good, but it just misses some charm for me. I don't really know what I'm supposed to get hyped about with OG,
Yeah, I think it's the same thing. I kind of feel like OG might be in that spot that NIP that we were in last year, where it's kind of like, yeah, we have like good pieces, but we didn't have like a real star until Device came, right? I think that's something that kind of lacks with this team. And I think the overperformance at Blast for them was a little bit overstated, I have to say, because there are a bunch of BO1s, and also they played Ancient, which they were actually quite good at Ancient. I'll give them that, right? But that's a small part of being like a top 10 team, right? Yes. So I think they have the good pieces moving forward, but it's going to be hard to see like how they're actually going to go up without getting, like you say, maybe a firepower upgrade, or maybe some different type of approach in the way that they play, like something that can unlock these players in some way.
Obviously, you can choose how harshly you critique it or how much praise you give. What did you actually think of Nexa when he was the IGL of G2? Do you think he did a good job as an IGL?
I think for him, like a lot of the time, whenever we played against G2, it kind of seemed like they had like a lot of strats and stuff like that, right? And I think that's not a bad way to play CS, where you basically have a bunch of strats where it's like there is actually so many where you can't keep track of all of them. You can't be like, oh, you got to watch out for that one, you got to watch out for that one, watch out for that one. That was something that I think they did, right? But I think in terms of just being flexible and stuff like that, I think what he might have needed to do more with that G2 team was to try to unlock the players a little bit more in some way, right? Because these kind of strategies can only get you so far. In some ways, running it in that way kind of limits you to the power of that strategy, right? Because some strategies, like, it doesn't matter. Like, if they're really good strategies, it's like you can have the worst players run them and it'll work. But if you have really bad strategies, even if you have the best players, it'll still work because your firepower is so good, right? So I think for him, some of the things that he needed to do were to just try to find that balance a little bit better between running more set strategies and just unlocking his players more, right? And I wouldn't be surprised right now if, like, on OG, if he's kind of thinking more in that way, where it's like, how do I get more out of these guys, right? Because when I watched some of their demos before, especially during the Blast one, they were running some of the same strats that the old OG team had, like with Alexi, but with some slight tweaks, right? So it's not like they're using the entire playbook, but there were a couple rounds here and there they're using those strats and just slight tweaks. And yeah, I'd like to see if Nexa can try to work on that aspect of getting more of his players, because I think OG are going to need it.
Because that would obviously, as much as people, I agree, they get. Partly it's because he's a very. Here's the thing: Nexa is a cool guy, by the way. Like, I've met him in real life. He is exactly as he appears on Twitter. He's a very amiable guy, as we'd say in English. Like, everyone you just like him by default. He's just a cool guy. I think because of that story, that obviously people felt sorry that he was kicked out of G2. I think they just wanted it to be like, but he's landed on his feet. Look, OG's even better thanks to him. Wow, he's way better than Lexi B. It's like, some of the hot takes on that fucking Blast tournament were wild. Because as you say, it was a bunch of online best of ones. Like, why are people losing their mind? And probably the most forgiving format in the history of the universe, where, like, if people don't know, it's like Na'Vi was allowed to lose like 3 times or something mental, and they still qualified. Like, what is this tournament structure? So it was mad anyway. But one thing I'll say about that is, like, that is the area I'm looking at in OG. Is one, as you say, like if he can get more out of the other players, that's usually a surefire sign, by the way, and IGL's doing a really good job, because players don't all just develop on their own for no reason. Like, as we said, players tend to just do what works for them and what they can. They get stuck in little patterns, you know. So if an IGL can really level up a bunch of players, that's one thing. And then secondly, fair play. If you're saying he was doing good strats, one thing I've always given him credit for is, I tell you what, as an actual IGL, he's a fucking good fragger, obviously, because he's played without being an IGL in his career. So if he can both actually call a good game, then actually he's fairly OP in terms of his firepower. He could really add something to the squad that not many other teams have, you know.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, like, you know, some people kind of understate his individual ability back when he was on OG in some way, right? I always felt like he
like G2
was solid. Yeah. Oh no, sorry, yeah. G2. Yeah, he was always generally solid in my opinion whenever he was playing on that roster, right? It was just obviously overshadowed by Nico, Hunter, that kind of thing, right? And he's not like he necessarily got all the best spots either, right? He'd be the kind of guy on ramp on Nuke, and then, you know, he'd be the A player on Mirage, like that kind of stuff, where he's not really in the middle of the action, where maybe if he did, maybe if he was in the middle of the action, maybe he would put up more statistically. Who knows? Yeah.
The reason I thought last year it was so hard to actually analyse G2 is because, I mean, look where they were in the world. They were literally like the number 3 team for most of the year. And then when we came to LAN, at times they were number 2 or number 3. So it's like, when you're that good, like realistically, I'm not really criticising anyone. It's just that people, in theory, there could be a better player that could make you number 1. That's really the angle you're looking at from. Because the other angle I thought with G2 last year, which actually did make it so that like people probably did focus too much on like Nico should carry the game. Because like they had both Amanek and Jax at the same time. It's like, dude, pick one. You can have one of them, of course, that you can make. They both can play their own role. We've seen them out, they're like specialists. The problem is if you have both of them, you're just going to have those games every now and then where they both frag really badly. And then it's like, now Nico does have to be like 2 people in the server to do it, you know, as everyone knows from the old Na'Vi teams, well, back when it was the bad old days when they had fucking Flamey and Zeus and those, you know, if 2 people play, 2 people can't frag, someone's got to make up for that, unfortunately. So I actually think all things considered, they got the absolute maximum out of that team last year, G2. Like if you knew those were the only pieces you had to work with, you couldn't make roster moves, I don't think you could get better results than that. They did fantastically in context, you know.
Yeah, they tried everything, right? Like even Nico was opping, right? Amanek didn't always op either, right? Like maybe the only other changes I can think of is maybe Jack that's opping or something like that. I don't know, right? Something ridiculous like that. But I do think, they tried almost everything they could with the pieces they had. So yeah, and I think they did fairly well, right? Obviously, there were some ups and downs, obviously with the Pro League result where they went 0-5 or whatever it was. Yeah. But overall, I think they did fantastic with what they had.
Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, you know, be a pleb and don't.